cloud of suspicion surrounds the deaths of Oscar-winning actor Gene Hackman and his wife, whose bodies were found in their Santa Fe home. No one had seen the couple for days, and authorities say they had been dead for some time.
It includes details on what Betsy Hackman was searching for before she died and the first-person view of the officers.
There was something buried beneath Gene Hackman's property that was never meant to be found, and what investigators uncovered there didn't just raise questions about his past. It answered a way that leaves no room for doubt. This isn't about rumors or speculation or the way history might choose to remember him. This is about evidence, biological, undeniable, and deeply personal. Evidence that points directly to decisions he made and actions he took long before anyone was looking. The moment the DNA results came back, everything changed. The case didn't just escalate, it vanished from public view, transferred quietly into the hands of agencies that don't deal in coincidences. And when you finally understand what was hidden in that tunnel, what it proves, what it confirms, and what it reveals about what Hackman knew all along, the story doesn't feel like an unsolved mystery anymore. It feels like something much closer to a judgment. The surface story nobody questioned. When Gene Hackman passed away at his $4 million Santa Fe estate in New Mexico, the official story seemed almost too easy to accept. He was 95 years old. His wife, Betsy Arakawa, had already died. An aging man lost in grief, slowly retreating from the world until his body finally gave in. Betsy's death was blamed on a serious viral infection. Gene's was recorded as heart failure. The story was neat. The story was human. The story was wrong. For most people, even the sudden arrival of federal agents at the estate barely caught attention. A man with Hackman's wealth and fame deserved extra caution, right? The FBI presence was dismissed as routine procedure when high-profile estates are suddenly left behind. The massive steel gates, the motion sensors surrounding the property, the thermal cameras placed along the perimeter walls, those seemed like normal precautions for a Hollywood icon who had spent years avoiding paparazzi. The strict non-disclosure agreements required for anyone who ever worked there. Practical, private, understandable. And that's exactly why it worked so well as a cover. The estate itself maintained the illusion. It stood hidden behind thick stone walls, completely out of sight from nearby roads. Years of intentional isolation had made every security feature seem ordinary. By the time Gene Hackman disappeared from public life, the property wasn't just a celebrity home, it was a controlled boundary. No one passing by ever questioned it. That was entirely intentional. This is where things stop making sense. When the first federal forensic team entered the front door, they didn't find the quiet aftermath of a natural death. They stepped into a scene that had been carefully controlled. And the moment they reviewed the behavioral timeline, the real one, taken from security server data, every simple assumption they had brought with them began to fall apart. Betsy Arakawa had died a full 7 days before Gene Hackman. 7 days in which the estate's entire communication system showed 0 outgoing calls, no emergency services, no family, no doctors. For 7 days, a 95-year-old man with known heart problems remained alone in a sealed compound with his wife's body and never once tried to call for help. Investigators retrieved data from the central security server on the ground floor. What they found was not the chaotic, scattered record of a man overcome with grief. The bedroom furniture had been moved from where it originally stood. Personal safes had been broken open. And on the exact day Betsy died, Gene Hackman had personally entered the code to shut down all internal surveillance cameras while keeping the outer security alarms set to maximum sensitivity. And this is what the timeline truly reveals. That setup isn't panic, it's structure. It's the intentional disabling of one system while carefully maintaining another, done by someone who knew exactly what they were doing and exactly what they were trying to hide. Behavioral analysts brought in to study the security data were clear in their conclusion. This wasn't confusion driven by emotion. This was the clear pattern of a deliberate containment process designed to blind the inside while keeping the outside barrier fully secure. This detail matters because of what the federal forensic record would reveal next, and because it marks the first clear proof that what happened at that estate was not passive, it was intentional. Gene Hackman made a series of conscious, deliberate choices to maintain and protect something hidden beneath that property. The DNA findings and the microforensic abrasion evidence confirmed the physical reality of those choices. That is what makes this particularly damaging for him, not just for how the public understands his death. The evidence does not show a man trapped in circumstances beyond his control. It shows a man who knew exactly what he was protecting and chose, again and again, until the very end, to keep protecting it. What LiDAR uncovered in the bedrock. The physical inconsistencies pushed federal agents to investigate further, literally. LiDAR scanning systems and thermal imaging arrays were deployed across the entire Santa Fe property. LiDAR, or light detection and ranging, works by firing rapid laser pulses at surfaces and measuring how long they take to return, allowing investigators to build precise three-dimensional maps of hidden spaces beneath structures without disturbing the ground above. It is the same technology used to discover ancient cities hidden beneath thick jungle canopies. Here, it was aimed downward, through the floors of a dead man's home. During the very first scan, the system detected a deep temperature anomaly. It stretched from behind the wall of Gene Hackman's private library, descending through dozens of meters of solid New Mexico bedrock. Agents immediately checked the findings against county and civil planning records. What they discovered, or rather, what they did not discover, confirmed that the anomaly was something far more serious. The underground structure the LiDAR had mapped in exact three-dimensional detail did not appear in any official planning records with the county. It had never been registered. It had never been disclosed. It did not officially exist. The entrance was hidden behind a bookshelf. That detail alone might seem unbelievable if the mechanism behind it were not so intentionally, almost brutally, practical. There was no biometric scanner, no electronic switch, no wireless signal of any kind. What secured that passage was a complex mechanical locking system built directly into wood and steel, a precise sequence of physical actions that had to be completed entirely by hand, requiring significant force to release solid steel bolts set into the frame. The design was deliberate and specific, a system that produces no radio frequency trace, a system that continues to operate during a complete power outage, a system resistant to remote monitoring, accidental activation, or detection by electronic scanning tools. Whoever designed this entrance built it for durability, for secrecy, and for survival under conditions most people would never even consider planning for. Agents moved through the entrance and began their descent. The upper stretch of the tunnel closest to the surface was reinforced with poured concrete and steel beams. Dr. Marcus Alford, a structural engineer assigned to the federal forensic team, studied the rivet spacing and fell silent for several seconds before speaking. The spacing and pour technique matched military-grade security construction standards from the 1950s exactly. He told the lead investigator that in 30 years of structural analysis, he had only encountered that exact rivet pattern in 2 other locations. Both were classified federal sites, but at a depth of 40 feet, everything shifted. The industrial concrete ended. The steel beams vanished. What replaced them were rough stone walls marked with thousands of primitive tool impressions. The air quality in the lower section of the tunnel revealed something deeply disturbing. Unnatural temperature variations, sudden changes in humidity, and a heavy concentration of oxidized metallic particles suspended in the air. The kind of chemical trace left by prolonged exposure to materials and processes that had no place inside a sealed, natural cave. The hand-carved stone core of this tunnel was not a modern build. It was part of an ancient artificial geological formation carved by human hands long before the military-grade upper section was constructed above it, and long before the estate itself was ever built on that land. Whatever the original purpose of this tunnel had been, it existed before the 1950 structure that concealed it. It existed before the estate. It may have existed before anyone still alive who knew of it. This was not a bunker with an older section. It was an ancient structure that had been reinforced, militarized, and buried beneath a private estate, with the clear intention that no one outside would ever discover it. If you have been following this investigation from the start, you already know that what was found at the bottom of that tunnel is the detail that changes everything. What the federal team was about to uncover in that chamber, and what the DNA analysis would confirm about the biological conditions inside it, triggered a classification response that locked down this entire case within hours. If this is the kind of story you want to stay ahead of, subscribe now and turn on notifications, because what comes next is the part they never wanted recorded. And then the microforensic results returned, what the DNA revealed. The dust samples collected from the tunnel's mechanical locking system told a story that forced the entire death investigation to change direction. Special forensic technician Raymond Voss, assigned to the federal evidence team from the Albuquerque field office,
was the first analyst to study the gears of the library locking mechanism under magnification. He had been instructed to search for anything that didn't match long-term inactivity. What he discovered instead made him put down his tools and contact his supervisor before writing a single line in his report. The metallic wear marks on the internal gears were fresh, not months old, not years old, but only days old, matching with forensic precision the 7-day period between Betsy Arakawa's death and Gene Hackman's. The implication was unavoidable. A 95-year-old man in the final recorded stages of heart failure had not spent his last days lying in bed. He had gone down into that tunnel. He had handled those heavy mechanical locks. He had entered the cold underground darkness at some point during those final 7 days and come back before collapsing for the last time. But it was the DNA analysis taken from organic material deeper within the tunnel that completely changed the nature of the investigation and produced findings that federal authorities moved quickly to classify. What the DNA test showed was not evidence of casual use or simple long-term storage. The genetic material recovered from the deepest parts of the underground chamber indicated exposure to biological conditions that should not exist in an isolated subterranean space beneath a private estate in Santa Fe. The exact classification of what was identified has not been made public. What has been confirmed through sources close to the original forensic team is this: the DNA findings caused an immediate escalation in the federal response. The case was removed from normal investigative channels and redirected through classification protocols, usually reserved for matters involving active national security infrastructure, not historical curiosity, but immediate ongoing concern. The organic material discovered in that chamber had no harmless explanation. Its presence confirmed that the tunnel had not been inactive. Something biological, something that left behind traceable DNA evidence, had been active in that space, and the officials with the authority to classify that discovery decided within hours of reviewing it that the public should not know what it was. Whatever Gene Hackman had been doing in that tunnel, whatever he had been watching over and protecting, carried significance at a level far beyond the private decisions of a retired actor living quietly in the New Mexico desert, a timeline that cannot be explained away. Here's the problem. The DNA findings didn't stand alone. They fit into a physical timeline that investigators were already struggling to make sense of. Consider what the security data had already revealed before the DNA results returned. Betsy Arakawa dies. That same day, Gene Hackman personally disables every internal surveillance camera in the estate while keeping the perimeter alarms at maximum. 7 days pass with zero contact made to the outside world. Raymond Voss's microforensic analysis of the mechanical locking system confirms the tunnel was accessed during that period. And now the DNA analysis of material recovered from the deepest part of the underground chamber confirms biological activity inconsistent with long-term inactivity. Each of these details on its own could theoretically be explained. A man shutting off cameras in the first shock of grief. An elderly man confused, perhaps going somewhere he shouldn't. DNA contamination from years of human presence. But when placed together in sequence, those explanations fall apart because they all point in the same direction toward a man who, in the final days of his life with a failing heart, was carrying out specific tasks in a specific order. Not randomly, not emotionally, but with the steady precision of someone following a routine they had performed many times before. This is the part no one in the initial coverage noticed. The federal response confirmed it. When investigators arrive at the scene of a confused elderly man's accidental death, they don't immediately classify forensic results. They don't deploy signal blocking equipment under the cover of night. They don't place national security holds on municipal complaint records from 2019. The speed and nature of the government response reveals more about what was actually discovered than any public statement ever could. And there's more. The DNA findings weren't the only biological anomaly identified in the chamber. Air samples from the deepest section of the tunnel showed chemical compounds linked to organic metabolic processes. Not old residue, not natural geological release, but active compounds produced by living biological systems. That discovery was included in the same classification order as the DNA analysis. Both were sealed within the same 12-hour window. Now the investigation team is moving deeper with that knowledge, heading toward the far wall of the chamber where the analog cable ends, toward the structure connected to it. And what they are about to uncover is going to reshape everything they thought they understood about what Gene Hackman was doing in that chamber below. When the full investigation team reached the bottom of the tunnel, they stepped into a chamber that shattered every assumption they had carried with them. The natural stone floor had been carefully leveled. Its surface was etched with a detailed system of astronomical coordinates, a precise mapping of planetary orbits that suggested advanced mathematical knowledge completely out of place for casual private use.